In this Elden Ring Nightreign video, we're going to be taking a look at Executor and how to play him in combat. We'll cover his stats, skills, recommended relics, weapons to look out for, and how to use him effectively in a party. So if you're playing Executor or planning to learn this class, this video is for you. The Executor is a melee-focused class that acts as a frontliner primarily geared toward dueling thanks to its built-in cursed sword mechanic. This Nightfarer is essentially Nightreign's answer to anyone looking for a Sekiro playstyle, with a built-in parry mechanic very similar to that of Sekiro's, and stats geared towards swords and katanas. If you played the Samurai starting class in Elden Ring and love dex builds, then this class is absolutely for you. In group play, you function mostly as a frontline DPS, slicing away at enemies with melee-based weapons. The parry mechanic also allows you to be quite a good tank, provided you can parry every attack coming your way. However, you don't have the health or defense to absorb many hits, so this style of tanking will demand a lot of consistency in the reflex department. From my experience playing this class, the parry mechanic isn't nearly as hard as the basic buckler parries in Elden Ring, and feels more like Sekiro parry timings, but with an even larger frame. When you take a look at Executor's health, FP, and stamina, he has a decent amount of HP and stamina, which are great as a melee character. He will need both of these things, but he doesn't have a ton of FP, which means he's not going to be able to use lots of weapon skills or Ashes of War, and he's not going to be able to spellcast effectively. With an S in dexterity, there are a few weapon types that you should look out for when playing Executor, and these are katanas, claws, daggers, curved swords, and whips, as these weapons generally have very good dexterity scaling, so you'll deal a lot more damage if you use those weapons in a run than something that uses a lot of strength scaling, because he simply doesn't have a lot of strength. So you kind of want to stay away from weapons that have these, like great swords, colossal swords, axes and great axes, hammers and great hammers, and colossal weapons, and stick to those other weapon types if possible. He also has S in arcane scaling, which improves the amount of blood loss and poison buildup from weapons that have scaling in these types. Almost all katanas and claws have bleed buildup, and a handful of daggers, curved swords, and whips also have this. And we'll get into this more in a minute, but that should make those more effective. Additionally, bows all have S in dexterity as well, and although you're probably not going to be playing at ranged if you're playing Executor, if you find a really good bow in a run, especially if it's one that's got status effect buildup on it, and you find yourself in a situation where you just can't get into melee range very easily, you could use that bow in order to help maybe apply a status effect before getting into melee range. So next up, let's get into Executor's skills and what they do in combat, into the nitty-gritty details of those. We'll take a look at his passive ability, Tenacity, first. So Tenacity makes it so that when Executor receives a status effect or is cured of a status effect, he will gain some passive buffs. These are predominantly a boost to stamina recovery and a boost to attack power, which seems to be about a 20% attack power increase in my testing, with the stamina recovery feeling similar to the boost you would get from the green turtle talisman in Elden Ring, and this buff lasts about 20 seconds. Compared to some other class passives, this passive benefit is not that great, simply because you're trying to avoid getting status effects on you in this game. But you could pair it with something like Seppuku in order to increase the blood loss buildup on your weapon and your attack power, and then also gain the attack power boost from the passive benefit and stamina recovery. So if you can find a weapon with that, with Executor, that is a great pairing. Additionally, this will trigger sometimes from facing certain bosses and enemies in this game. It's just very unpredictable, and you can't trigger it reliably without having very specific things, making it not as useful as some other character buffs. The character skill for Executor is called Suncatcher, and this is a huge part of the way you play Executor, because what it does is it sort of allows you to draw a built-in special weapon, or a sword, that allows you to deflect attacks, not unlike Sekiro. The window for deflecting is quite generous, and it's even larger than in Sekiro, so it's quite easy to do. And I would recommend that if you think it sounds challenging initially, to give it a try anyway, because it's not as hard as you think. Just make sure that you're deflecting early rather than later, because if you deflect too late, it'll actually count as a guard, consuming your stamina, which deflecting does not. And if you deflect really too late, then you'll take damage. And when you have this mode equipped, when you have Suncatcher out, you'll also gain a unique slash skill that costs FP, and you can use it normally, or you can use an enhanced version by deflecting enough attacks. 4 attacks deflected will allow you to charge this up, it'll start glowing, and then you can use a special version of its skill that will deal more damage. What's really great about this is you can actually store this. So for instance, like if you deflect 4 times, but you don't want to attack with it right away, you can just switch back to your normal weapon or not use your weapon skill, and then when you want to use it, you can use it later. So charging this up with some early deflect and saving it for when you need it is a good strategy. There are really two big downsides to Suncatcher though, and the first is that you have very limited mobility while the sword is out, because you can only walk, and a lot of bosses are extremely mobile, and if they're not targeting you and attacking you, then you're going to have to get out of this mode to go attack them, so it doesn't make sense to use it in those cases. And additionally, while the weapon has relatively good damage early on, it tends to fall off later versus regular weapons that you can find, making it so that you typically won't be using this weapon offensively because you're going to be doing less damage with it offensively, and it doesn't trigger bleed either. So because the default weapon of Executor can trigger bleed and other weapons can trigger bleed or other status effects, you typically won't be using the Suncatcher in an offensive manner most of the time, except at the very beginning of runs. So you're really going to be using this mode mostly for deflects, and you can deflect just about every attack in the game, including imbued attacks with status effects or skills like roars. These can also be deflected, and it's really good for getting up down teammates because damage isn't super important when you're getting them. It's the amount of hits that you do to get them up. And when you have this out, if like a boss is targeting you, trying to attack you, you can deflect really quickly and then go back to attacking so you don't take damage and they don't interrupt you. And one really important thing to note about Suncatcher is something that I call switch deflecting or switch pairing. And this is when you switch to the cursed sword, if you time it when an attack is coming into you, it'll actually deflect it. So this can be very, very important, and it's very important for mastering this class because you're going to be attacking with your normal weapon to deal most amount of damage, and then you're going to want to learn to deflect that attack as it's incoming, switching in a Cursed Blade, deflect all the attacks that are hitting you, and then switching back to your attacks to deal damage. Lastly, we come to the ultimate skill for Executor, which is called Aspects of the Crucible Beast. Activating this skill will turn your character into a huge Crucible Beast and gives you 4 unique attacks for 15 seconds. Light attacks become a 4-hit combo string, swiping right then left, then both sides, ending with a slam. Heavy attack becomes a 3-hit combo string, swiping right and then right again after a 360 and ending with a slam. Guard becomes a very long-range roar attack, which is quite powerful against groups of mobs that are scattered around your area. You can also use this to revive knockdown teammates from far away very easily. The last attack in this form is a Crucible Blade Swipe, which will end the ultimate ability after being casted. You wind up for a few seconds and then slash in a big AoE, dealing a bunch of damage and stance damage as well. All these attacks will get progressively stronger as your levels increase, and by quite a large margin too. From level 5 to level 10, you'll see around a 50% increase in damage with heavy and light combos. If you want to optimize your damage in this form, from my testing without getting into the math, the light attack combo actually delivers moderately higher DPS than the heavy combo, so you want to prioritize this one. And additionally, you should always try and finish the last few seconds in this form by using the final attack I mentioned or the skill, because that would prematurely cut your time in this form if you use it at the beginning. So you want to try and use this skill right before you run out of time. That way you're going to run out of time anyway. Another thing I'll mention about this ultimate before we move on as well is it's a great way to get out of tough situations where your health is low, since it heals you to full when you cast it. Conversely though, if you take damage in the range of your human health bar while in the ultimate form or die, that will apply to you once the ultimate expires. You do have a higher health pool when using this though, so you can take some hits and still have full health when it ends, but if you take too many, you will not. Next, we'll take a look at weapons. You start with the Executor's Blade, which has bleed buildup and the Unsheath skill. You can keep this weapon for quite a long time, but others you will find will deal more base damage. Once I get further into a run, what I like to do is dual wield katanas. This is because two-handing a weapon is a pain in the ass when swapping with the Cursed Blade. Every time you swap to parry and swap back, you have to redo the weapon to set up two-handed. So instead, I just opt for dual wielding, so I don't have to do this every time, but that's just what I like to do. The Executor performs best with weapons that complement its dexterity and arcane scaling, so dex weapons with bleed buildup are what you're going to look for, like Reduvia, Wakizashi, Bloodstained Dagger, Scavenger Curved Sword, Eleanor's Pole Blade, Thorned Whip, and All Claw weapons. From my experience though, katanas are always the best bet and most common drop, namely the following, which are Uchigatana, Nagakiba, Meteoric Ore Blade, or Moonveil. And the absolute best weapons you can get are Rivers of Blood and Hand of Millennia. Rivers of Blood is more likely to drop and is equal to, if not better than, Hand of Millennia due to its skill Corpse Piler. This skill is a mid-ranged blood slash attack which successively slashes the enemy with blood to rapidly accumulate bleed buildup, scaling perfectly with Arcane. The weapon itself has an A scaling with Dexterity as well as C scaling with Arcane, which is quite rare, making it a perfect fit for this class. Hand of Millennia has an S scaling with Arcane and is a legendary armament dealing more damage, however the associated skill is not as good as it doesn't have Arcane scaling. If you somehow manage to find both though, you can always dual wield. For your 4 other weapon slots, you want to be on the lookout for a few passive effects. Anything guard related will likely be good for Executor since you can guard accidentally from time to time when trying to parry attacks. For example, successful guard giving damage negation or improving guarding ability or health recovery on successful guard. Depending on the type of weapon holding you're doing, you can also get a passive bonus such as bonuses to weapons when two-handing or dual wielding to improve your damage. Successive attack bonuses also work as dex weapons tend to attack very quickly, so these are not a bad bet either. In an ideal run, you'll probably get dual Nagakibas with status effects build up like Frostbite or Poison and ideally get to level 7 on the first night. On the second night, some talismans for stamina or dexterity like Green Turtle Talisman or Millicent's Prosthesis, and hopefully a Rivers of Blood and a Smithing Stone to upgrade your Nagakiba to purple, and then you'll be set for killing the final boss. For relics, you get a few great relics from the Executor quest line, as well as 3 chalices. The urn has red, yellow, and yellow, the goblet has red, blue, and green, and the chalice has red, yellow, and multicolor. For relics, you get quite a few good ones later on as you progress the Executor quest line. You'll have to beat a few Night Lords in order to finish it, but once you do, you get relics which restore health when you charge the Curse Blade Yellow, and another which restores health when you roar an ultimate form. Other relics you can use before these include ones that give bonuses to guarding, such as extra HP on guard, and dexterity, health, arcane, and endurance are also good bonuses. If you want to tank damage, there's also a relic which can draw enemy attention while guarding. When it comes to party composition for Executor, he's just like Wilder in that he can fit into just about any group. Since he's a frontliner that can both tank and dish out crazy damage with bleed procs, it's a very flexible class in what it can and cannot party up with. If you have 2 magic users or squishies, you can focus on taking aggro on most bosses and enemies and pairing attacks to give your teammates space to range them down. If you already have tanks like a Guardian, you can comfortably use your weapons most of the time and act more as a DPS. In essence, you just need to adapt to the party you get and try to play as comfortably as you can most of the time. Note that Executor also plays exceptionally well as a single-player class due to the fact that he can deflect most of the attacks in the game, and in order to deflect those attacks, he has to be the target of them in order to charge up his blade, and this is easiest to do when playing single-player. In summary, Executor is a higher risk, higher reward class which plays mostly the same in every run, but has the unique parry which almost feels like you can make a whole game centered around it. To get the most out of this character, it's going to depend on how well you can parry and deflect, and if you can find the right weapons. You should make sure to keep in mind small tips that make a big difference, like switch pairing or helping up teammates using the roar and ultimate form, and if you can master the basics of this class and get the right equipment, you'll deal insane damage and take absolutely none. So that wraps up our Executor guide. I hope you guys got something from this one. The parry with this mechanic is just fan service to Sekiro, so if you like that game, you should absolutely love this class. And if you liked playing Samurai and Elden Ring, you'll definitely want to check this out. As always, if you have other tips for further Executors out there, please leave them in the comments, and if you have questions, also leave them there, and I will try and answer them as soon as I can.